Women should feel empowered to hold each other up.
We want to build a community to share other women's stories. Hi, Suzie. Thanks for joining me.
Hello, Terri. Pleased to be here.
So glad to have you. And this is the Tea with Tea podcast, and it's all about women in empowerment and leadership roles. And so happy to have you joining us. So thank you so much. Do you mind just giving us a bit of information about yourself and your role?
Yes, absolutely. So my name's Suzie, and I am the Global Head of People and Culture at Foresight Group. So we are essentially a sustainably led investment company. So we've got 3 different strategies in terms of how we invest. And my role is to oversee all those people who are working on the investments and supporting the work that's done on those investments. And I've been there for about 6.5 years now. And thoroughly enjoying my role. And the focus is always around the people and the culture and what we need to do to get that right. So absolutely everything you just mentioned around, women and empowerment, that's a huge piece for us and a big area of focus for what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think part of why obviously you and I have connected, I know that you've done a lot internally at Foresight with regard to female leadership and just generally around things like imposter syndrome, which I know you were talking about on a set of podcasts recently. Do you mind just sharing a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, like many companies in the financial sector, have a challenge around female representation in leadership. It's really easy to explain the narrative as to why that's the case. So you just have to look at the tenure of the people who hold those senior roles. And they have their place there, and that is right. They are in the right roles. But what's really important is acknowledging that we have that lack of female representation and then mapping out what it is we're going to do around that. So we signed up to the Women in Finance Charter in 2019. So that's really helpful in terms of setting publicly our goals and where we're hoping to achieve. So every year we have to publish how we are doing in terms of working towards our goal. And year on year, we see incremental increase. Now that increase is not just by potluck, you have to have a strategy to it. And that's probably the things that are quite useful for people listening to. Obviously people want tangible takeaways when they're listening to something or attending a talk. So it's really important to sort of map out your goal, what you're trying to achieve, and then align a strategy to actually getting that. A lot of it sits around succession planning and talent mapping. So really looking at who have you already got in place and where do those people need to be brought through. So once you've got that identified, then you really need to consider, well, how are you actually going to do that? So myself and our executive leadership coach have written a Women in Leadership program called Elevate. So that'll be rolled out across Foresight this year, and that'll focus on the senior manager level and above, and really sort of helping work on their values and visions and driving them through into those next stages of their career. And we also have a mentoring program that we push quite heavily. We have it mainly focused internally, but where we can't resource female representation roles, for example, we're more than happy to work with external networks to help partner people internally with external people. So, for myself, I have 2 external mentors, and several members of my team do. And we see that across the business, and we're able to help facilitate that where people are looking for representation that we just don't have at this point in time. But again, it's about facilitation and making sure that you can support people.
And with regard to that, so I know mentorship and obviously allyship particularly, and having sponsors within an organization for women is really important. How did you go about getting the external mentors? Is it someone in your network? I think people would be interested in that. Not everyone knows exactly where to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been doing quite a lot of talks recently, both with junior HR professionals and with, we work with some schools in our local areas as well. So just did a careers carousel, not last week, the week before, and this week talking to HR professionals who are sort of a few years into their career.
Yeah.
Really championing networking. It's
Yeah.
really important. I mean, it must be a huge part of your role. You must
Yes.
sort of spend a lot of time
Yeah.
networking.
Yeah, it's great. We get to meet so many people in so many different types of roles. That's the best part about it. I think if someone's a bit less open to going and putting themselves out there, I do think it's harder. But I agree. I think you kind of have to put yourself out there externally.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I talk very much to my team about, you know, when I get invitations through to things, if I can't make it, forward it on to them, and then they'll be like, oh, that's not my grade. And it's just like, just go, put yourself out there, get talking to people, listening to lots of talks. There's I mean, we're in an age and a space where information is everywhere. It's so accessible. You know, the shift to things being online is, you know, it's great in one way because it's accessible. Obviously, we miss then the social interaction of it. But if people inspire you from the talks that you listen to, actively approach them. People love having their ego stroked. So if you actually say to somebody, that was really super inspiring, you know, would you be my mentor for the next year? Yeah, in terms of time commitment, be reasonable, you know. You don't need to meet sort of like, you know, every week or every month even. It can be just a quarterly catch up for an hour. But it's about finding people who inspire you or talk about something that you would like to get better at talking about, or somebody who you think is going to be able to support you or champion you in a different way. I mean, we've actually used the Professional Women's Network before now to get mentors. I can be completely honest and say I'm not sure that was the most successful pairing.
Right.
But it was a really good introduction to starting doing it. And then other mentors I've got, it's training that I've been on and people have been really inspiring, and I've wanted to understand more about the area that they're the expert in. So I've asked them to be my mentor and help upskill me in those areas. You know, one in sustainability and one in DE&I. And those are really meaningful and really impactful relationships. So yeah, they've been really, really helpful. So I think you just have to get out there, network, meet people, put yourself in uncomfortable situations. You know, it doesn't last long, and the benefits you reap, you know, if you're constantly going peer to peer rather than you know, up the way, you're not really progressing yourself. So and as I say, everybody's just a normal human being at the end of the day, you know.
So true. I think
there's nothing that special about anybody, you know. Everybody goes home, takes the work clothes off, put the joggers on, you
still
know, still a person, has some dinner, you know. They're totally normal. You know, and most people, as I say, are very flattered to be approached. And what's the worst that can happen?
Exactly. They say no, but at least you know that you've asked as well. Just on that then, with Elevate, obviously you're talking about the different facets and what you're implementing at the moment, and obviously the fact that you've seen success year on year in terms of female representation within finance, which, as everybody knows, it's definitely lower, I think, for the majority of places. Is there anything else that you feel is useful that's an additive to that in terms of Elevate? I know that we've talked about coaching before, and in particular we've had a really interesting conversation around planning and being able to have it all, and I think that's something that we should talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the point about Elevate, is it's to stop and take stock, because I think that quite often we're just on a treadmill and we're just going, and you just don't realize that you've not necessarily stepped back to look at the whole picture. So we've probably all have appraisals, for example. So it's like, okay, we all know what we're supposed to be doing for the next 12 months. We've got our KPIs, we've got our SMART objectives. Brilliant. That's great. But that's the next 12 months. Is
Yeah.
You know, it's a really good thing to step back and have a really good look at who you are right now, what you really want to achieve as the overall picture, and then making a plan for that, rather than just sort of this idea around the last 12 months. And you're absolutely right, Terri. We talked about, so I'd done another MSc in, and this one was in coaching psychology. I was so privileged because it actually started in the year we went into lockdown.
Yeah.
And so I was so lucky to have something,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
I think in a time and a space where a lot of elements of our lives were removed.
So difficult. Yeah, of course.
I had this amazing learning platform, essentially. But as part of the MSc, you had to be coached as well as coach.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting. I genuinely thought I was a brilliant listener. You know, I've been in the people space since I was 21.
Yeah.
So nearly 20 years. So I thought, you know, I've nailed it. I'm a great listener, and I've been on so many management training courses where I have done listening exercises. So I'm an active listener, and I really thought I was really good at it. But it turns out I wasn't. I was rubbish. I was really, really naff at it. I'd like to think I am much better now, but it's really hard to listen properly. It's actually exhausting. If you do coaching and you do a couple of sessions, I mean, it is
drained.
It is absolutely draining, because you're not just listening, you're listening to the way people say things, the emphasis, the key themes, so the thematic analysis around the words that are getting used, the positioning of the words, the timing of the breath, you know,
so interesting.
looking at the visual cues alongside and making sure that they're salient, and you know, and working alongside, or whether or not you think there's a bit of a disconnect,
something behind it,
or that a bit more. So I'm a huge advocate of coaching, but a lot of it was around at the beginning, you know, taking this step back and looking at yourself and understanding properly, you know, what are your core values, you know, what really resonates with you. And I think, and we've talked about this before as well, you know, you get bombarded in life by all sorts of information and things. And we talked about how on Instagram I followed a lot of you know, boutiques that I loved. I was just in a permanent state of want, you know, and if somebody had have asked me, you know, in any given week, you know, like, what is it you really want? I could probably have told them an item of clothing. I was pretty sure
I want this
really
and that.
wanted, you know, and actually, you know, that's not really what I want. You know, I want healthy and happy children. You know, I want to have a body that is fit and healthy, because I'd like to be a really active and involved grandparent. You know, I'd like to make sure that we have financial security, so, you know, we can help the children with their house deposits when they're older. And I'd like to be able to, you know, at a point in time, support them with their families, and therefore, you know, retire at whatever age is relevant to do that. So, you know, those are the things that I really want, but it just got so muddied down by other things, you know. And so I think that taking a really good long hard look at yourself and understanding what values you have, what you really want. And I know that so many people talk about vision boards in a fluffy way. I mean, you don't have to have an actual physical vision board.
Which I think some people don't realize. I think some people do think to do one, like they think, oh, I'm going to put my goals down, but I have to get all the cutouts of what I'm envisaging. Like it's not that, is it?
It doesn't have to be that. It's, you know, it's really just, I mean, some people, it's really helpful for them to visualize it. And it's really helpful to sort of put that up somewhere so they can just check themselves again. But I mean, you don't have to actually actively create it, but the theory behind it still remains true, which is it's really useful to envisage what the end game is.
Yeah.
So for example, if you were going to make a full-on 3-course Sunday lunch and you're going to do prawn cocktail starter and a full roast dinner and a trifle for pudding.
Sounds nice.
It sounds good. But I mean, you're not actually going to be able to do that unless you make a plan.
Yeah.
You have to have a plan. You have to have a shopping list.
Yeah.
You have to write the timings down.
Yeah.
Because if you don't,
isn't it? It's
you're
like
not going to get it, So a vision board is just ultimately knowing what your menu is. And then you're going to need to work back from that in terms of, well, how are you going to get there? So, timing, steps, ingredients, all of that is relevant. But those are things that are really helpful. It's going to be very, very difficult to achieve what you really want to achieve unless you've really properly understood who you are and really understood what it is you actually want to achieve. And then you just need to map out what's going to need to happen between A and B, essentially. And as I say, it's really helpful to cut out the noise. So, if you're, I think
it's a great bit of advice.
Yeah, I mean, if you're like me, it's just like there's not enough hours in the day. Well, then look at the stuff that's taking up the hours of the day that's really not conducive. I mean, things like endless scrolling. I'm not sure.
You deleted everything, didn't you? In the end,
I just deleted all the apps, and genuinely, for the first couple of weeks, I was reaching for my phone and picking it up, and they'd be like, "Oh, I don't have anything on this to deal with." But then it was about, well, what do you want? Are you wanting to speak to a friend? Well, pick up the phone or send them a WhatsApp or do a FaceTime. If you want to engage with a human, then engage. So it's just about figuring out what it was you were trying to do. But I genuinely think I'd just become conditioned to it.
Well, and that's sadly, especially people today, and I think we've talked about this a bit as well in terms of looking after the younger generation. And I guess this isn't just in relation to females, but I do think that the female population we have, it affects mental health as well, right? I think it's and it doesn't just mean it's not just subject to females, but I do think there is a correlation between the constant want for something and social media and mental health and how we manage that. And I think you and I have talked about that, and that's something that I think workplaces and obviously I know that you've talked about it within Foresight, you do have to think about.
Oh, massively, and to go back to the little boutiques that I like, it's such a treat now to actually drive down. So if I do get that feeling of like, oh, right, okay, it is time for a treat, do you want something new? Maybe I've got a special occasion. It's so nice to go for a drive down and go through that experience of, actually looking at things and touching the materials, maybe trying a few things on, and the people in the shops, all salespeople tend to be quite lovely. So, it's an engaging experience and stuff. And it is so much nicer than just sort of like, walking in through the door and another parcel's been thrown through the mat. And then I look at it and I might even grace it with lifting it up onto the side table. But I know what it is. So I just sort of like, pat it, leave it there, and then wander off into the kitchen. And it's such a soulless experience.
Yeah.
So I think that we can put some of the joy back into experiences as well by putting out social media. For example, it's great that we think we can keep in touch via Facebook, but who are you keeping in touch with? I mean, Adam Arif, who I went to primary school with, who I haven't seen in like 30 years. I mean, it's great that I have access into
their lives. Yeah.
Quite frankly, I'm really not interested, and it's about acknowledging that. And then the people that I am interested in, rather than sort of scrolling through things, make time to see people, put an hour in, go for a coffee, go for a run, get creative with the way that you meet people. It doesn't have to always be like a night out or something as formal as a dinner. You can look to meet people in different
It
ways.
doesn't have to be hours at a time either, does it? It can be a short coffee over lunchtime if you've got a bit of time for a break, or it doesn't need to be hours of time.
Yeah, exactly. And and remembering that we are social
Yes.
creatures. We are actually designed to be with people. We are
Yeah.
designed to interact and engage and stuff. So again, thinking that we can just do everything behind a screen or through a device, through an app, like that isn't how you get the best out of people. It's just not. And I think people will know that from, you'll have a phone call or a conversation with somebody, and then you'll meet them in person and they'll tell you sort of something that's, of relevant importance. You're like, but you just spoke to you last week, you didn't say anything. It's like, oh, didn't want to say it on the phone.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah, so yeah.
And I think, and from what we've talked about, obviously you're a mother.
Yes.
And I do think juggling motherhood with a role such as yours, you're obviously in a really senior position within Foresight, that takes up a lot of time. How best do you manage that? What can you share in terms of your journey there? Because obviously I know it's a lot of people's thoughts in terms of feeling like you're letting one side down, I think.
Yeah, so I've got an 8, 6 and 2-year-old. And I think that it genuinely has been a real struggle in terms of the balance, but I think I've got the right sort of setup in terms of childcare now. And again, that, you go through a few sort of iterations of childcare before you finally get it right. But I feel like I've got the right childcare in place now. I think for me, I always wanted to be a full-time worker, and I'm absolutely a-okay with that in my brain, because I know I'm a better mummy if I'm out and about doing my grown-up things, just making sure that I have good quality time with my children in the morning and after school, and then family time at the weekend, super important. But when I pick the kids up, the phone goes away, they get dedicated time. That's really important. That's their time. And then, if I need to, I can log back on in the evenings and just tidy up and crack on with the bits that I need to get done. So I think having sort of boundaries is quite important. When I first started the role, I said that I would need to leave every day at 5 o'clock. I think that the business has always been really considerate around that. So the PAs will always try and schedule in meetings, that I will be able to leave at 5 o'clock, and they double check beforehand if something's going to go in. Now, I'm very, very fortunate, my parents live in the cottage attached to the house. So if I ever do need to work late, then I can. That's fine.
So handy.
Yes, that is. And I'm very, very lucky. I do understand that not everybody. So that's, and just to be clear, they do not do my childcare. They do the running to from clubs. They don't do childcare. But that means I am able to stay late when I need to. So that's a really big plus for me. But I think setting boundaries is really important. Managing your employer's expectation is really important.
Just about to say, it's great that you've had that conversation and have just been upfront. And I think that's the biggest thing, is communication, and just saying, look, this is, I think boundaries are a thing that everyone is talking about these days, because people are starting to set them and saying, look, if X is making me unhappy, then we need to work around it, and we need to have something in place that is a compromise for both sides. It's not that you're not going to pick back up on the work, it's just that you need to be able to balance.
Yeah, exactly. But I've sort of had to do a bit of traveling around recently to go to our overseas offices and really get to grips with how everyone's doing there and things like that, and do quite a bit of speaking events and things outside of work. So those are the days where I don't get to go home and put the children to bed or hear about their day. But I know that my children are already, even at their young age, like proud of mummy and proud that mummy works, and you know, they understand that, you know, hard work equals nice things, and, you know, they're pretty fond of nice things, I'll be honest. So, you know, they're quite happy, and again, I think it's just about, you know, they understand that that's mummy's job and that's what mummy does, and the thing is, you know, they're not going to remember ultimately the few occasions where I've not been home. You know, it's absolutely fine. And things like when my parents are away, and then we need to drop the boys to and from their clubs, and we don't have an alternative arrangement for that, because obviously we're used to having my parents do it. Then Sean and I, we work from home and we try our best to make it work. But on the weeks that we can't get the boys to their taekwondo or their gymnastics or their swimming club, then it's okay. You know, that's fine. You know, they don't have to go religiously to every single club 3 times.
Like you say, they're not going to remember the one that they missed last week when they're back at it the week after. I think it's the compromise piece.
And I think, you know, I think kids sort of, I don't know, they're fairly, well, mine are anyway, that, you know, they're fairly intuitive, you know, they understand, they get it. I think it's just a conversation, and then it's all good. And I think just, you know, I think it's becoming a bit of a well said phrase now, which I think is a great thing, but it is about being a bit kind to yourself as well, and just, you know, give yourself a little pat on the back. It's like, oh, well done me, you know,
I've managed to sort out this week. Exactly.
You know, and we're all still alive, relatively clean, and
happy.
Exactly.
And I guess that leads into what we've also talked about from a mental health perspective, which obviously is something that's important to be spoken about. And luckily we're in a world where we do talk about it a lot more. I do think that actually women are more open with their feelings. It's a well-known fact that is the case. But what do you do within Foresight to create that safe space at work? Because I think that, again, is not everyone has quite got that yet.
I think that's absolutely right, you know, but you know, psychological safety is absolutely key, and, you know, and that term makes it sound so sort of like over the top, and it's not that way at all, but it's just about how you create a space where it's truly inclusive and people can share how they feel, you know. And we talk about it from the start in terms of people's inductions, that, you know, we're really genuinely interested in people's well-being. The team have great relationships with all new joiners when they're onboarded, and letting them know that we're here for them. We build it into our management training as well, in terms of making sure that managers are starting conversations with open-ended questions and leaving that space so people can fill it with you know, some reflection around their thoughts and feelings, as well as just sort of getting straight into the workspace as well. We're looking at social interactions, so we have things like monthly mix and mingles, and making sure that the staff are getting well integrated. We have buddy schemes, so if you're a new joiner, you can get paired with somebody who's been in the business a little bit longer, but again, it's just somebody else to speak to who you potentially might feel a bit more comfortable with, rather than somebody in your team. We've introduced the return to work maternity scheme as well, where you can have a buddy, so somebody who's recently come back from maternity leave, maybe the last sort of anywhere between 1 and 5 years. And it's just, you know, to have a coffee and a chat to see how somebody's finding the return to work. And you know, there are real common things that everybody, you know, feels that they go through. You know, going on maternity leave in the first place is the weirdest thing, because quite often, you know, you're in a really good spot in your career and you just think, yeah, I'm nailing it, and I'm really integral to
Not now.
this place. And then all of a sudden, you know, you're actually told that, you know, well, you're not going to be working for 6, 9, 12 months, however long you're taking off. And you're genuinely hoping the company fails a little bit without you there. It's just sort of like, you know, because you feel like you're such an integral
I've done
part.
I've done so.
And then everyone carries on as normal. It's like, oh, I just felt like I was really important, and now I don't feel like I'm important anymore. It's like, oh, that's sad. You know, so I think yeah, there's lots of different things, and it's just being mindful of that and having the conversations. And I think what's also important, so I've just had somebody on my team who's been off on maternity leave for a year, and what's really important is me working with her to understand, right, okay, we've missed a year, so what do we need to bring you back up double quick time to get you back on track for where you were heading in your career. And it is about putting extra focus on that, and making sure that you're helping bridge that gap between individuals who have had a period of family leave and individuals who haven't, and sort of helping bring them back up to a level playing field.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I think especially if you have taken 12 months out, you haven't thought about anything else other than what's going on at home. So I think you do need some kind of refresher to get you back into thinking about work again. Like you say, I think it's both ways, isn't it? Sometimes you think, oh, how have they gone on with like normal? But equally then once the baby is here, you're kind of fully immersed in that world. And actually you probably don't think about work until a few months before, when you're thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to go back.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's a big change,
Yeah. And then it's the juggling, isn't it? As you say, the childcare, managing, I think, just your emotions throughout that point.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's a really big thing. And I think as organizations, we're getting better at the mental health focus, but there's so much more to be done. There's so much more to be done. And that's why we do things like podcast series on, imposter syndrome and the invisible load. And it's really just about saying, we know these things exist. We're happy to have a conversation about it. Here's some information on it. Here's some hints and tips.
How to tackle it.
Have a think. And if you want to pick up the conversation internally, then pick up the conversation. But we're here to say that these things are totally normal.
It's normal. Yeah. I think just normalizing it is key, isn't it? I think. But equally, as a female leader, it's amazing to see you kind of really taking the charge on that, because I do think sometimes it's not always driven from the front, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, it's great. And I think as we go through and as we do more of these things, I'll certainly be drawing on the male colleagues as well in the business, and making sure that we're getting it as a representative piece. It's just the ones that we've been doing were part of the International Women's Day celebration. So we've focused on some of the key themes that were coming through in relation to that. But it certainly is not just for women. They affect everybody.
Exactly. And do you think there's an appetite within the business that recognizes there still needs to be a bit of growth within the female representation?
Oh, no, absolutely. And as I say, it's just about using now the tools that we've got. It'll be really exciting to see the Elevate program launched, and our CFO is the executive sponsor for that. Great. And so he'll be openly activating each session and coming in and providing that visibility, and then we can share the results from that training with the executive committee. And it's all about making positive steps forward.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing, Suzie. Is there anything else you feel you'd like to share with us in terms of female leadership?
I think the thing is just, it's all the good stuff we've already heard. Lean in, lean in, get involved. If you feel comfortable, you're not pushing yourself, get uncomfortable. Get comfortable with getting uncomfortable. I think is key. Networking is so important. I would definitely champion that. Mentoring is an absolute foot up. It really is. And if you haven't taken the time to step back and think about your own values and what it is you want to achieve, definitely do that. And I think that if you've got the financial affordability, or if your company will implement it, I think coaching is so super helpful. It just gives you that space, that dedicated space to focus on either you as a person or in terms of you and your professional development. And I think that both are incredibly helpful.
As you mentioned earlier, it's about knowing yourself and knowing what it is that you're striving for. I think that definitely helps with with getting to that point, definitely having a coach and helping with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And what about you? What do you think? What do you think is key for women in leadership?
I really think that actually I'm very on board with being able to underline what your own values are, and then being able to figure out from those how you get to the point that you're trying to get to. I've got a mentor and a coach, and I do think that that's really important. And I think having like a sponsor within an organization, if you can get one, doesn't have to be a female, but I think just having someone that you know is there with you and is equally rooting for you, I think that's really important. And I do think having good leadership throughout an organization really helps women with their careers. I think it just gives them the confidence. But like you say, it is ultimately putting yourself out there, and things don't come to you, do they? I think you have to go and get them if you want them.
That's right. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Suzie. The last question, because we are on Tea with Tea, is how do you take your tea?
Well, this is shocking, but I do not drink tea. I know.
Any hot drinks?
I drink decaf coffee.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure I only ever drink that just so I can have a biscuit with it. Yeah, that is my hot drink of choice. A decaf coffee with preferably some form of chocolate and or biscuit with it.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And thank you so much for everything. Like, I'm sure everybody will take some good takeaways from this.
Oh, super. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Suzie.